Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, depending on where you are. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the 10-year anniversary of Electronic SWOT, 10 years of public procurement for workers' rights. So we have a fantastic event today to celebrate this really, truly outstanding achievements that we've all together in this network that we all have managed in this last 10 years. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping as usual. Please, we have interpretation, so please click on the globe that you have at the bottom of your screens if you would like interpretations, and you can choose which channel. And once you've done this, I think we'll just give it a go and start. As I said, the Electronic SWOT family is really excited to welcome you to this event. We are now going through the journey of this last 10 years, and we are recognizing what has happened and how we started. Would like to recognize the beginning, the 7 NGOs that actually came together to create Electronic SWOT. And we did this with the support of the EU funding, and I think my colleagues have maybe the logos of the NGOs to share. And yes, this is how it started. And in these 10 years, we've come together to create Electronic SWOT and to have with 10 visionary public buyers that were affiliates to this project, where we approach and to say, come and join us in transformation of the way the public sector engages with its supply chain. And we've grown from these 10 founding members to more than 1,500 affiliates at the moment. We are across 13 countries, from Europe to Australia, and here you have our wonderful family showed together. And what has really underlined of these 10 years has been collaboration, how we've collaborated with each other, and critically, the public sector with civil society in the production regions that monitor supply chains. So altogether, we've managed to increase the power of public procurement to create this network of civil society, public buyers engaging with the industry with the main aim of protecting and promoting human rights and labor rights in supply chains. Public procurement is, and what we do is a means to an end, which is the protection of labor rights in the supply chains. So we'll celebrate in these 2 hours. We're going to celebrate the achievements in making supply chain more interconnected, making it more transparent, creating a high road for due diligence, and improving working conditions on the ground. We do have formidable challenges, and we'll be talking about them as well. But what we've learned here, and what we really want the message to prevail, is that through the art of collaboration, we have another 10 years, 20, many more ahead, and we will be able to celebrate in the next 10 years that we're even stronger and more impactful even than today. So I don't think I've introduced myself. Apologies. My name is Olga Martin-Ortega. I'm Professor of International Law, but I'm also one of the people that have been in the journey for the past 10 years, part of the advisory group first, member of the Board of Trustees for nearly all this time, and currently senior advisor to Remediation supply chain. And I have the fantastic honor to start by presenting our keynote speakers, which are, as you know, leaders, 2 women that have led the consolidation and the strengthening of both public procurement and workers' rights. We have Pichamon Yeophantong, which is an associate professor and head of research at the Center for Future Defense and National Security.
Moram dat broj telefona.
Sorry, Rusika, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. At Deakin University, and currently is the chairperson and member Forum Asia Pacific States of the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights. Thank you. Hello, Pichamon. And we have Heidi Hautala, who's the former Vice President of the European Parliament, and her role in inspiring and shaping the EU public procurement and the human rights indulgence in supply chains journey has been key. And we owe Heidi this the real hardening of this concept. Thank you so much. So in this first panel, we're trying to place where we are in this in 2025 in business human rights and public procurement human rights, and in these 10 years that that Electronics Watch has been operating, we've seen this journey from EU guiding principles that were in their infancy, human rights indulgence that was just starting as a concept, and in this decade is hardening into mandatory obligations. We've also seen the social considerations addressed through public procurement move from the exclusive focus on domestic markets to global environmental concerns, and more relevant to what we're here today, to public procurement as a mechanism through which we can address and promote human rights in global supply chains and really take account of the impact that our purchasing decisions with our public money have over those who produce the goods that we consume. In these 10 years, we've also become more aware of how the power imbalances in supply chains impact right holders and what is the capacity for them to uphold their rights in this context, and how important meaningful stakeholder engagement is to address both the specific instances of human rights violation, but also to confront the systemic conditions which perpetuate such abuses and to bring about transformative change. However, we've seen as well in the past few years really fast and alarming reversals in some of these trends and some of these achievements, including through the corporate capture of key concepts such as worker voice, supply chain responsible conduct, fierce opposition to the developing mandatory human rights indulgence frameworks, and a worrying trend of shrinking civil space, emerging counter trends, as well as a continued threat to workers and human rights defenders. So to discuss these achievements, we have, as I said, the privilege of having Heidi and Pichamon with us. And so, my first question to both of you, and maybe Heidi, you can go first, is, in this environment that I've described of massive achievements and at the same time now great risks, what keeps you going into this journey and this fight that you've had for these years?
Thank you very much, Olga. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I think what really keeps the whole let's say the broad community trying to achieve corporate accountability through supply chains and value chains is that this trend is growing. Despite of the reversal, despite of the backlash, we see that the inspiration is there, the consumers, investors are asking questions and they need answers. And then what also keeps me going very much is that we see this kind of meaningful collective action like Electronics Watch, which now is 10 years and going for the next decade. So short answer, the trend is promising. The battles are hard, but I believe that we are, as a collective movement, across all stakeholder communities, I think it's a winning trend.
Wonderful. And if I can turn to you, what makes you get up in the morning and continue with this work?
Well, I must admit, when hearing that question, I was thinking to myself, this might trigger an existential crisis of sorts. I mean, it goes without saying, as you noted earlier, Olga, that we are in rather difficult times. And I feel since joining the working group that I've been exposed to both the worst of humanity, but also the best of humanity. And as Heidi rightly noted, and I fully agree with her, this type of collective endeavor that organizations, networks, initiatives like Electronics Watch and others represent is really what gives me hope and a sense of optimism for the future because we really need to work together now more so than ever before. And this type of, if I may call it initiative, really demonstrates how we can in fact work together to arrive at, to sing from the same tune sheet, but to arrive at positive outcomes for those rights holders who are most at risk, in this case, workers.
Wonderful, thank you. And then picking up, Heidi, on the development of public procurement and the development of human rights due diligence. So, how do you see in this years, but in the coming 10 years as well, the role of public procurement in the future of advancing labor rights?
When we started to sort of explore around the European Parliament and in the stakeholder community a move from voluntary standards to mandatory standards, then simultaneously this idea that if we would manage to have mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence standards for private enterprises, then what about the public entities? And we know that the volumes of public procurement are huge, and we know that it could be and it can be a strategic force for the good. So I believe that now, even if we are still struggling in different regions, not least in Europe, with achieving those mandatory, meaningful standards on human rights, environmental due diligence, then there is already a lot of attention on public procurement, and the very sort of thankfully the review of the key EU directives on public procurement is ongoing, and I'm very aware that there are people who are trying their best to achieve also, if possible, mandatory standards for public procurements. And I think it makes all sense. It's very proportionate also.
Indeed, the lack of public policy coherence, the policy coherence was really striking, and how we're developing rules for the private sector without considering that actually the public sector's commercial decisions have equally important repercussions. And of course, Pichamon, your work has focused on the role of workers, and how do you see the move to worker-centered approaches, and to what extent is this a real meaningful move, or is also part of the sometimes more buoyant discourses around corporate responsibility, and how do you see the role of workers and worker-centered approaches in this evolution?
Sure, no, thank you for that, Olga. And I will say that I'm very proud of the thematic report that the working group has published on labor migration, business, and human rights, where we focus on the experiences of migrant workers in a cross-border context. And the work that went into that report is informed, very much by the work that Electronics Watch and your partners have done, but equally is based on, the progress that we've made really in relation to labor rights more generally. So I would say that, in addition to acknowledging that workers are very much central to the accomplishment of the business and human rights agenda, and more specifically to the implementation of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, I think we also have to acknowledge that workers and their voices are very much foundational to the business and human rights movement itself. I mean, the BHR movement, if I can call it that, is deeply informed by the labor rights movement, which, as we all know, has for many decades and fought to ensure safe working conditions, fair wages, freedom of association, the right to collective bargaining, and so forth. And many of the tools that we're seeing now used, whether it be in relation to auditing or human rights impact assessments, are also very much informed by these struggles that we saw in the labor rights movement. And so, the most recent, and by most recent, I mean just a couple of weeks, actually it was just last week, wasn't it, that we had the UN Forum on Business and Human Rights, the largest ever. The theme that we focused on was accelerating action in relation to the guiding principles. And in order to ensure that, we really need to build upon the legacy that we currently have. And part of that means ensuring that workers very much remain at the center of this business and human rights agenda, and to recognize that they are not simply stakeholders, but very much rights holders. And this may seem like a pedantic distinction, but it is nonetheless a very important distinction. Acknowledging that, when you engage with workers, it's not just simply a matter of ticking the box or tokenism, and viewing them as stakeholders, but really they have rights that are at risk in many of these. When you look at the kind of the precarious conditions that many workers are still in various parts of the world, it is important to treat them as rights holders and to be cognizant of the very real rights that are being threatened for workers, especially at a time when we have organizations like the ITUC, right, noting how workers' rights are in free fall across every continent. So this is where now more so than ever before, we really need to see solidarity with workers, especially those working in those very precarious conditions in new and emerging sectors, including like the platform economy. And to also ensure that in relation to that, when businesses undertake human rights due diligence as a process, that they integrate, workers' experiences, worker voices into those processes to ensure that human rights due diligence is very much about addressing the risks to human rights, in this case to labor rights, and not really focusing on the risk to businesses, which is one of the issues that we're now seeing emerge as a bit of a risk when we see some of the language around risk and so forth being more focused on the risk to the business's bottom line as opposed to the risk to human rights. So I think I'm digressing a little bit, but it suffice here to say that when it comes to workers and workers' rights, their worker-centered approaches are absolutely vital to ensuring that we implement the guiding principles in a way that is truly reflective of the conditions that they work in. But it is also absolutely critical to ensuring access to remedy, which remains one of the lesser developed and least implemented pillars of the UN guiding principles. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Olga.
Indeed. Yes, thank you so much, Pichamon, for these reflections. And so, Heidi, linking these challenges that Pichamon has laid out, and the still, significant gaps and needs that we have in implementing worker rights. How do we strengthen the link with public procurement? How do we make it possible that public buyers not only have an awareness and understanding of this, but also feel or are able to articulate really that public procurement is the tool. It's one of the tools that we have to actually make this possible, to actually kind of properly articulate human rights due diligence in supply chains and state responsibility for business and for human rights.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Pichamon that this shift from thinking of just stakeholders to rights holders is really essential, because that's the purpose of the whole of UN guiding principles, to guarantee rights and access to justice if things go wrong. I believe that just now there's a need to deepen the work on the sort of transition minerals. We will, and this is very much at the core of Electronics Watch. Even now, when Electronics Watch is expanding to the automotive sector in public procurement, so we need to really try to understand how these value chains are shaped and what happens at the origin. The most problems occur in sourcing those minerals, but not only. Of course, there are big issues in factories, and the work against forced labor and breach of internationally agreed workers' rights is key. So there are new areas to deepen the work on. And then maybe some also new instruments that public procurers could be interested and look into. For instance, this idea of responsible contracts is very much on the rise. There also the Electronics Watch has a good legacy to take on to the next decade. So how to make public procurers also cooperate their suppliers and ask the suppliers also to look into their value chains. This can be a great opportunity also for SMEs. So it doesn't only mean internationally known brands in the sectors. So all in all, I believe that public procurement is also it's close to the local decision making very often, and I would say that some of the most promising things happen at the community and local level in decision making. That politicians feel that they need to do fair procurement. My responsibilities when I was vice president of the European Parliament for 7 years was sort of the environmental management of the House. And then we started to shift towards, let's say, sustainability reporting and green procurement. What was interesting is that now, of course, we have been focusing very much on workers' rights. But in fact, sometimes this work starts from environmental responsibility. For me, for my work in the European Parliament, to try to sort of encourage and inspire the procurement agencies to go for workers' rights and social issues, it was quite difficult actually. So what I also believe is that we need sort of integrated thinking. How, for instance, now the whole issue of climate, the climate crisis or the climate chaos, as the UN High Commissioner called it last week in Geneva. How is it related to workers' rights and human rights? How is right to clean environment and climate also, how is it a human right? So we need integrated thinking, and maybe this is also a bit of a challenge and let's say next steps to Electronics Watch.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you both to Pichamon and Heidi for opening our discussion in this, very important settings of what has happened, but what are the real significant challenges that we still have, and what is the role of public procurement in this, and what actually not forgetting that what is the public procurement is a means to an end to continue to protect human rights, labor rights, migrant rights, and in the context of the climate, as Heidi has put it. Thank you so much for your participation and opening up this with these fantastic remarks. And well, now I'm going to move to our next panel, which we've titled 10 Years of Building Public Procurement Power. And in this panel, I will invite our next speakers, which are Deepika Rao, which is the Executive Director at CVDEP in India. Deepika, we have you here. Let me see if we've got Deepika. Okay, well, I'm sure there you are. Thank you very much. CVDEP is a Bangalore-based organization which works on workers' rights and corporate accountability. And as I said, Deepika is the executive director. And we have Martina Trochnat, which works as responsible procurement manager at the Greater London Authority Group. And she leads on ethical sourcing. Thank you, Martina. And Kate Sullivan, who many of you know because you're engaged with Electronics Watch. She's the Director of Affiliate Engagement at Electronics Watch. So as I said, we're trying to explore here 10 years of building procurement power. And we know Electronics Watch has been at the heart of this and building networks, power, and leverage. And in the past 10 years, we've seen a strengthening of the network as a community, and the enabling conditions. We've set up the enabling conditions for transformative change. And this transformative change has to be at the center, as we said, empowering workers to uphold their rights and capacitate public buyers to play a key role in this change. So I will start with Deepika to ask you, as you are at the forefront of the defense of workers' rights and you see firsthand how this collaboration is made possible. What are some of the examples that you can share with us of cases in which our network has facilitated and improved the handling of grievances and contributed to concrete improvements on workers' rights?
Thanks, Olga. Actually, it is very important to stress about the context in which we are working, but maybe I will speak about that a little later. Some of the successes that Electronics Watch and Cividep have had is we have been able to really bring out cases which otherwise would not have received any media attention, nor any attention from regulators or audits. These are issues which we are able to capture because of our constant and regular and rights-informed interaction with workers in their communities. And then from there, how are we really able to, with Electronics Watch's help, able to take it to the right place? Either we take it to a working group, directly to the company, or to an intermediary who has the responsibility for upholding the social standards. Recently, we've had some success where a very large smartphone manufacturer, one of the biggest in India, when we spoke to 100 of their workers, we realized that they were not being paid statutory bonuses. This is a 1 month wages, which the worker is entitled to every year. And because of arbitrary thresholds like their contractual status or their work experience in the company, which is not actually a legally allowed threshold, they were denied bonus. And we came to know this through our interaction, and we carried out a survey, and we were able to raise it with Electronics Watch, who then were able to bring it to the attention of the working group that works with that particular company. When we carried out follow-up surveys, we also got to know that the workers then started receiving bonuses. So this is just one of the examples where we are able to show that this issue otherwise would have gone completely unnoticed, unchecked, because currently in India and in many production countries, the environment is such that workers have very limited avenues to take their grievances. The judiciary and the law and order authorities are not very sympathetic to worker issues. The labor departments also are being looked at as those facilitating investment rather than facilitating the upholding of rights. And the media is also compromised. And so in such an environment, for us to continue to do this work is extremely important, and consistently and in a structured manner. When we're able to take the voices from the field and take it up to the right space where something can be done about it. There are sympathetic ears, and there is leverage.
Wonderful, thank you. That's a very clear example of how the power of leveraging that and having a wider support from a community and from network has actually provided specific successes. So we'll come back, Deepika, to this, and but first let me bring in Martina, because Martina is at the forefront of the other side of our model, which is the public procurement, and she's exercising this leverage of public buyers in her every day. So, Martina, can you point to some of the changes of how public buyers approach their role in the supply chain and how develop practices to act more efficiently on the evidence that you're receiving?
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think as public buyers, we have seen really two main trends, and one is internal in how we approach our risks in our supply chains, and then one is also external, how our suppliers do that. But talking about our own organization, I think it is really because of Electronics Watch that we have a much better understanding of what risks lie in our supply chain, and concrete risks as well, not just general terms. There's loads of guidance depending on the sector or industry, but Electronics Watch is able to tell as well, in your specific supply chain, this is what's going on. And I think together with that, there is also more willingness to admit that there are risks. So I think it's a really powerful education piece. So even giving an example, looking at Transport for London's new modern slavery statement, we have a whole page dedicated to that and to what Electronics Watch has reported to us in the past year. So we're actually saying, in 2024, these were the issues identified, and we name them, we say how many there are, and then we also discuss some of the successes. But I think this would have not been possible really a few years ago. So, we don't want to, kind of hide what's going on. We're actually happy to say these are issues that have been identified. And together with that, there is also a much better understanding of our need to map our supply chains to get this kind of information. And this has led to organizational developments for us and for other public buyers as well. So, for example, now we have a much more streamlined way of getting information from about our zero-emission buses. But also, this knowledge that supply chain mapping is really important has made it into our policies as well. So the GLA group refreshed the responsible procurement and social value policy this summer, and supply chain mapping is really one of the key elements in there in terms of ethical sourcing. I think externally, our suppliers and our supply chain has also changed. So I think there is, much greater transparency, willingness to share that kind of information, and also willingness to collaborate to address issues. I think one of the biggest shifts has been going away from a zero tolerance approach to actually acknowledging that the issues are there. We're not there, asking anyone to expose themselves so we can catch them out. But actually, it's again another education piece the Electronics Watch has done in terms of continuous engagement with the industry. We're not here publicly accusing any specific company, but we're here to collaborate together because our goal is the same, which is improving workers' rights.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Martina. Thank you for this example of how you're working. And then again, we'll come back to some of these points. But I want to bring Kate in because Kate right in the middle in Electronics Watch itself, and Kate, we've seen this big increase in public buyers that we showed at the beginning, and would like you to discuss a little bit the role of Electronics Watch in this shift of public sector integrating human rights requirements into the contracts and tenders, and what kind of changes in practice have you seen that has enabled this practice?
Yeah. There's definitely been changes, and I should say I've only been with Electronics Watch for 4 years, so maybe my perspective is skewed by what I've seen while I've been here and what I've heard. But even in the last 4 years, we've seen changes in a lot of different areas. So I think the first one you spoke about is that the numbers are growing, but also the engagement and the level of awareness is growing. So we've seen year over year increases in the number of affiliated organizations who request support for integrating human rights into their tenders and contracts, which is really good. And there's been a qualitative shift there too. So the first stage is usually what requirements should I include? And now we're seeing a lot of organizations moving past that to what are the means of verification that I should be requesting. And some are going further and saying, could you help us to develop guidance for evaluators on how to assess the responses? And I think that shows that there's both a commitment internally to building knowledge and capacity among within public buyers, but also a more nuanced understanding of the type of evidence that companies could be presenting them, and a better understanding internally as well of how specific something needs to be in order to be objectively verifiable. So we're moving from that what to the how. And we see that also on the contract management side. I think the introduction of monitoring status reports a few years ago represents a big change, because thereafter we saw the number of affiliates who reported directly engaging their contractors using the evidence that we're giving them has increased substantially. It's no longer just the really big, well-resourced organizations with a dedicated team member for sustainability who are able to do this. And that's really exciting to see. Obviously, it's important that the big framework authorities and purchasing consortia are still engaged, but that smaller organizations and those without the same level of experience can also feel like they have a part to play, and they can be one of the voices who's calling for change. And I guess the last piece on that, in terms of changes that we're seeing with our members and their practices, also has to do with the cooperation between public buyers. Collective leverage is and always has been a part of our model. It's at the heart of what makes this work. And we're seeing it exercised more consistently now. So just looking back from 2024 to 2025, there's been a 35% increase in the number of public authorities who participate in at least one working group or in a coordinated action, like sending a joint letter to their suppliers. We see them strategizing together, triangulating information that they're getting from common suppliers, thinking about how they want to harmonize standards. So I see that as really important, because eventually there's going to be a tipping point where you'll have enough public buyers coming together that the collective leverage will be such that we'll see impact beyond individual cases. And at the same time, I think we're seeing a change in the market, and Martina touched on this with the transparency piece. I just want to put some figures on that. There's a growing market acceptance of transparency requirements, even though there are companies that are still pushing back on this. And one of the indicators of that are the number of brands that are disclosing their tier 2 suppliers. So if we look at the year that I joined Electronics Watch, 2022, 17% of the factories that were disclosed to affiliates and their supply chains were component manufacturers. In 2025 alone, 90% of the factories disclosed have been tier 2 suppliers. So that's we're able to go get more information about deeper into the supply chain. And we know that where there's less visibility, there's a greater opportunity for exploitation. So in terms of monitoring human rights, that's a really important enabler.
Great, thank you. You touched there in something as well about the Martina said, but also something very important that Deepika said at the beginning is like, without the efforts on the ground of the organizations like CVDEV and the pressure as well from the network, the wider network, there are all these cases that will remain in the dark, and as you said, putting the spotlight makes it more difficult for anyone to deny it. But Deepika, we've seen therefore an improve in the engagement that the companies feel that they need to. Can you hear me all right? Yes. So we've seen this improvement in companies engaging with the instances that you have found, and also the space that you have in those kinds of engagements. But I think something that also struck me of some of the times that I've heard you speak is that when sometimes there's an action from companies, but you don't know what happened. You don't know, you know where else it goes. So we have a good start of the process of engagement, and then it becomes maybe corrective action that we don't know whether it's been implemented, etc. So in a way, we still have this gap in remedy. We are becoming so much better at identifying, a little better at addressing changes, but are we still having a big gap in remedy? How do you see this from the ground?
Exactly. So, I mean, when we think about meaningful stakeholder engagement, we have to understand that it has to be two-way. Engagement with stakeholders cannot just be looked at as a means of collecting information and then not sharing what is done with that information. We are constantly trying to sort of build the linkage, identify, make the linkage between grievances, workplaces, and public buyer leverage. But if this information is taken from us and then we are not involved in actually arriving at solutions, then we see that the action that the company takes is usually detrimental to, in fact, the worker rights in the area. And so I would really appeal to any companies present in the room or intermediaries present in the room to look at this as a two-way platform and not just receiving information, but also sharing, so that there can be some joint ideation as well as joint planning for what can be remedial steps.
Great. So there's this gap, as you said, in meaningful stakeholder engagement. It can't be just one way in which we, companies and public buyers, collect information. It has to be collect information, work for. And in this regard, I think one of the elements that in this we've built in this 10 years is to actually put right holders at the center. And maybe that we need to continue to build is this, whether there should be a more direct relationship as well between the public buyer and the worker itself, or the worker group that is affected. So, Martina, going back to you, do you see a value in public buyers getting involved in remediation and getting involved in having a more direct relationship with the community that is at risk or has been harmed?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for sure, I think it is just really hard, and this is where Electronics Watch comes in, right? Like normally for anything we buy, it depends on the supply chain, but the link to the workers on the ground, it's just not that immediate or apparent. And being able to identify maybe some organizations that can support them and how to get the information to them or from them in terms of what's happening is really challenging. And I think that's really what's been changing thanks to Electronics Watch. And as Kate mentioned, the monitoring status reports as well. That's really like a direct line of information that reaches us on what is going on on the ground. What are the workers reporting? Have there been any changes? And then, requests for action on our part as well, if any negotiation stalls or more support is needed. So I think it is obviously crucial, but I think as public buyers it is really hard to do that unless it's a services contract where you might have your cleaning staff on premises. That's obviously much more direct relationship. In global supply chains, yeah, we are struggling overall, and Electronics Watch is one of the lifelines we have in terms of getting in touch with those rights holders.
Wonderful. And then Kate, as well, following up on this. So with the work that Electronics Watch obviously is doing in the meaningful stakeholder engagement and the change of some of the barriers that we had and that you've so well described, and how we've had a significant change in transparency, disclosure, and in engagement. But to what extent we still have this gap that to move from enabling conditions to systemic change that actually ultimately impact on the ground?
Yeah, I think there's different elements of it. And picking up on what Deepika said, I think making sure that meaningful stakeholder engagement doesn't just happen at the risk identification and assessment stage. So really bringing workers and their representatives into the remediation process on a really consistent basis. And we do get pushback to that, asking companies that are otherwise cooperating with the process and using their leverage. And then you say, oh, well, we'd like a trade union representative or our monitoring partner to be present. And they say, whoa, hold on. Not everyone, there's differences here, but there's obviously space for improvement there. I think other major challenges in terms of filling this gap, obviously, is reaching whatever that tipping point is, having enough public buyers who are pushing for this, that it becomes a business risk for companies that don't demonstrate cooperation, that don't exercise meaningful stakeholder engagement, that aren't transparent, and that don't show evidence of what they're doing. Because we know there are companies that are doing some good work on this, but they don't share what it is that they're doing. And that makes it difficult for the end customer to verify that it's happened, and for rights holders also to have trust in the process. So I think there's a couple of different elements there. And then, of course, I think going forward, this needs to happen at a larger scale. So it's great that the partners that we have on the ground are doing phenomenal work, Electronics Watch and its members, but we want this to be, a movement of everybody coming behind those who are being exploited and working together. And I think, the more that voices that you join to that call and the more coordinated that you can be, the more effective that the work that we're trying to do will be.
Yeah, that is a very important point, this the point of trust in the process. And I think I would like for the three of you to actually reflect a little bit more on this. And that, we've had these 10 years of building procurement power. And so to what extent have you seen an advance on this and from the two perspectives, or the three perspectives here? So Deepika, to what extent do you think workers and your organizations on the ground are actually considering that we are developing process that can be trusted, and what do we need to actually improve that trust?
Yes, so we should be able to report back to workers with concrete sort of changes that have taken place. But many of the times what happens is we ourselves do not know. So we would have conveyed the grievances to the right sort of people, but then how this is then utilized, what action is taken, and how it impacts workers, that is then for us all over again to sort of speak to workers and sort of glean from the interactions with them. If the companies were to work with us, or the intermediaries were to work with us to arrive at joint solutions, then it would be far easier to communicate this to the workers, and as well as verify this information from them. So it's very important that that engagement with Electronics Watch and its monitoring partners is seen not just as a way to get information, but as a sort of a partnership. Yes, otherwise, typically, what action companies take after receiving information is very narrow in the way that they will protect their own interests. And that typically means that it's a very reactionary action on the ground, and we see that workers either lose jobs, and they are subject to higher surveillance. So I mean, it becomes a bit of a difficult situation for us, because workers are sharing with us things which are very difficult. It affects their livelihood, and when sharing of this information further makes it difficult for them to continue working, then it doesn't the trust cannot be gained at all.
Mm-hmm. And so as Kate has said, we have several companies as well here, and of course companies that are engaging they should be praised in terms of engaging in the process, but we hope that this is as well an opportunity to learn as well, or to hear more directly what are the obstacles that even when we come with the goodwill of engaging with the right holders, what it actually means when we talk about meaningful, we're actually talking about what it means for the workers to be able to these processes to actually have a resolution and to be a trusted process. So Martina, do you also see that the trust in the whole process of engagement and that you can actually achieve a result that is important for what you're doing, which at the end of the day is managing public funds and allowing all of us in your case to be able to be functional in the humongous London Authority, Greater London Authority. So have we seen a developing of this trust in the process, and what else do we need from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the trust is definitely there. I mean, of course, from our team, the responsible procurement team, but also more widely, and that is because of how clear Electronics Watch has been with what they do with the information, where the information goes. I think there can be some uncertainty at the beginning for sure in terms of why do we need to disclose this? Why do we need to say that there are risks in our supply chains? Will that not put us more in the public eye? Are we admitting to something that will come back to haunt us? That is a consideration for sure. And that's why, I've mentioned before in my answer as well, the importance of this education piece. And it's because people in a procurement function aren't human rights experts. And, people at the head of some organizations aren't either, and that's okay because that's not their role. But this is why really we need to be clear about our goals, what this means in terms of an organization, and being able really to articulate that this is what best practice looks like, which it is. And the Electronics Watch has been really helpful in this as well. Just in September we had a few workshops in person with a few people from the team from Electronics Watch visiting us in London and having, case scenarios of what would happen if different violations were identified in our supply chains and how we would engage, but also a much broader introduction to Electronics Watch, which data we have for our supply chains, why this is important. And this was really, really instrumental in engaging all the different organizations within our group. It really demonstrated, this is what we're doing. This is why it is important. And yeah, I think that engagement like that the Electronics Watch offers as well is really, really useful for public bodies, because I can give a presentation, but it doesn't have the same impact if it comes from me versus Electronics Watch that can bring, the testimony of workers as well, and a much, much broader look. In terms of moving forward, I think there's definitely that remedy piece, right? We would like to be more engaged, and as public bodies, I think because of we're spending public funds, it's really important to demonstrate impact. That's one of the key things that we need in terms of justifying why we're spending money with Electronics Watch, why we're spending money with having staff like me that works on human rights specifically. And unfortunately, the human rights piece is where demonstrating impact, especially in global supply chain, is the hardest because we don't have that kind of data. But I mean, Electronics Watch is doing it and will continue to do it. So for us, that's really, really crucial. Wonderful. It would be great to have it in other sectors. I think that's our challenge. That's where our challenges lie, not necessarily where Electronics Watch is. And, even the low emission vehicles program that's now become the, part of the main offering that developed so quickly. And, we were able to achieve results so quickly. It's clear that, the dial is moving and we are making great progress.
Yes, and I think you and I have heard many times from public buyers. So where is the textile watch, the tables watch?
Yeah,
actually, which is the things that the public buyers purchase. Also.
Yeah, we would love a train watch or something as well. Tube watch.
Tube watch. That would be fantastic. Thank you, Martina. And then Kate, yes, as well. You were the one that as well brought this to the table, the trust in the process. So what what do you think is needed in the way you're working and the way you're working with your network and engaging with workers, but also companies and public buyers to continue to develop this and to make, you know, the next 10 years of the work that we're doing meaningful and really significant.
Yeah, I think, you know, to foster trust in the process. And obviously we're a facilitator, right? We have monitoring partners like Cividep and others who are doing these amazing training workers and hearing every day what's happening on the ground. We have to be accountable to them and to the workers that they're working with by making sure that we're getting feedback on how things are going and constantly improving. And then as a facilitator, the other direction towards the public buyers, I think being transparent about what we know and what we don't know, what we're able to influence and not. You know, sometimes we have to suspend cases because we feel like there isn't enough leverage or the evidence isn't strong enough and it doesn't make sense to engage. And that's not always a comfortable thing to be able to say, but it's better to be honest about where we think we can have an impact than to pretend that we can do everything. So I think that accountability and transparency on our part, if we expect it of companies, we have to also do the same. And I think that goes for the way that we engage companies in the remediation process as well as a facilitator. And we have seen some progress there too, in terms of the trust that is developing. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but I think some concrete examples, you know, I can think of two brands recently where we've had really constructive dialogues, one within a case-based remediation and one just kind of generally. These are companies that were previously very, very closed off that have been not only open to talking about really difficult issues and how they're trying to address them and what they don't know how to do yet, but also seeking guidance, for example, on how to engage stakeholders meaningfully in the process. That's not something we were seeing 10 years ago. And while they're, you know, maybe not representative of all the different companies that we engage with, I think that's a big step forward. I would also say in terms of seeing a change in the trust with companies, we've seen resellers and distributors stepping up in a different way, understanding that their role as an intermediary in facilitating the exchange of information is really important. And with public buyers, I think, as Martina was saying, a lot of it is about testing and seeing that we're going to respect their information and their needs in the same way that companies don't want dirty laundry aired in public. We're not here to try and point fingers at anyone, and it's okay not to do everything from the beginning. I think a lot of this is recognizing, okay, where do we want to go together and what can each of us do with the resources and the time that we have? So I think us demonstrating that we're here to help and giving examples of how it works and pointing to those who've been on this journey with us for a longer period of time and the successes that they've had is how we can continue to build trust in the process and trust between the different actors who are involved.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the three of you for bringing us your perspectives, but also especially for the really hard work that you're doing and to become on the ground. And then, of course, you know, all the we all do as well is to facilitate and make your work more meaningful and hopefully more successful with the understanding that that's really what drives all of us. So thank you, Deepika, Martina, and Kate, for this fantastic panel. And I'd like now to move us on to the next section of our event, which is an interactive, we're having an interactive interlude in which we have asked all of you to come together and help us create a live global manifesto for public procurement for workers' rights for the future. So before we go to the next panel, what we would like to, is to actually listen to all of you. And so you know, this year marks our 10 years of work. We want to look ahead together. We want to create this sort of live manifesto for workers' rights. So we invite you to share your thoughts in the link that has just been posted in the chat, in the Padlet, which is when you click on the Padlet, you will be able to write, then click on the little pink plus sign at the bottom, and then you'll be able to write anonymously around 25 words on what actions or priorities should we collectively focus on in the coming decade to achieve our vision of global supply chain workers realizing and defending their rights. So please post your ideas. They would really help us. We have the fantastic support of Jean Crasher, who's also been with Electronics Watch from the beginning, and who's going to help us then put this all together. But we would want this to be a collective vision on what should be done to advance workers' rights through private procurement. This Padlet is open now from until the end of our event for another half an hour once we close the event. So you can do this now. You can think about it. It's going to be open for a bit longer. So wonderful! I can see there's a lot of contributions already, and or discussing meaningful stakeholder engagement, the role of unions, which we will come back in the next panel to. Very good, bigger focus on raw materials, as Heidi has pointed out in her keynote reflections. As Jim just said in the chat, please, if you want to endorse any of the ones that are already there, feel free to click on the heart and expand Electronics Watch. I've seen one about expanding Electronics Watch probably to other sectors. Monitoring in more factories, as Martina Drexler was also pointing out. Building social criteria in public procurement. Fantastic. So we can see entries from all the sides, from public procurement, from workers' rights, and about expanding our model. So leave you one more minute on this, and then I'll move on to introduce the next panel. So just 1 minute, and I'll move on. Okay, well, thank you. Continue, please. And I can see that we have a lot of contributions. It's fantastic. And as I said, we're moving on to the next panel, which we've named Racing to the Challenge. And in this panel, I believe we have as well sorted some of the technical difficulties we had with Bjorn Klessen. So I would like to introduce, here's Bjorn, thank you. I would like to introduce our fantastic panel for this last, near last part of our event. And we have Nadia de Leon. Hello, Nadia. Nadia is the current director of the Institute for Occupational Health and Safety Development, IOSAD, if I say it right, which is a pioneer safety group in the Philippines that was established in the 1980s, and Nadia is the current director. Richard, you're at Monash University in Australia, and Richard is overseeing the strategic procurement strategy and governance function at Monash, and this includes managing the university modern slavery program. Very interesting to hear about as well how Australia is facing this, especially the university sector. But you are a member of the Electronics Watch Board of Trustees. And of course, we have Bjorn Klessen, who everybody in the Electronics Watch family knows as the executive director and overall inspiring figure, and keeping everybody always full of enthusiasm and energy. Thank you, Bjorn, Nadia, and Richard for joining us.
Thanks, Olga.
Nadia, we'll start with you, and we'll start, with this panel specifically is about racing to the challenges. We've moved on from the previous panel in which we've seen most of the achievements, and we're now trying to explore what realistically would electronics watch look like in the next 10 years, and what are the achievable ways in which we may change some of the power dynamics that we've described. And we've heard as well at the beginning in the keynotes that we face significant global challenges from the shrinking of civil society, emerging counter trends, and increasing increasing pressures on public sector buyers, which we will as well be able to explore. So let's focus on these challenges and how we overcome them, and we've tried to identify a set of 3 challenges that we could address and maybe categorize them as substantive challenges to do with the specific risks of human rights, labor rights and supply chain, from occupational health and safety and freedom of association. Then more procedural challenges, which are to do with like how do we back our claims with credible evidence, and we've discussed this in the previous panel as well, especially in the world in which technology is playing a much and AI is playing a much more increasing role in collecting and compounding information. And then a structural challenge, which revolves around meaningful stakeholder engagement and right holder engagement in the processes, including remediation. So turning to you to tackle these substantive challenges, especially occupational health and safety, which you are, of course, a leading figure in advancing. So tell us how you see the important gains that we've have, but what are still the things that we need to focus in the next 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Olga, and happy 10th anniversary to us, Electronics Watch. As a new member of the Board of Trustees, I'm truly honored to be part of this discussion. For many of us who work for OSH in the Philippines and across Asia, Electronics Watch has always been a steady and constant partner. As we look ahead and prepare to rise to the challenge, Olga, I just want to reflect maybe just a little bit on what stood out for me as a labor and OSH rights activist from the decade. Actually, we've made important gains in occupational safety and health, but many of them are still fragile. We've seen concrete improvements, especially after workers have put forward their demands, and actually as a result of their consistent, monitoring, reporting, and pressure. But actually, these gains can, these gains can quickly disappear. In reality, across the globe, millions of workers are still getting sick, getting injured, and sadly, a lot of workers still die due to unsafe working conditions. One more thing, or another gain that I would like to mention in the field of occupational safety and health, in 2022, occupational safety and health has been recognized thanks to the tireless work of workers all over the world. OSH is now considered as a fundamental right and principle at work. And actually, this is not just symbolic. It places OSH on the same level as freedom of association, non-discrimination. It means employers can no longer say that safety improvements are too costly and it is beyond their budget or beyond their control. And looking at this across all angles, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for Electronics Watch in the next decade? It gives Electronics Watch a greater leverage. Leverage when we talk to brands, leverage when we negotiate remediation, leverage when we hold suppliers accountable. And most importantly, when we say that OSH is a fundamental right, it highlights the responsibility of the government. It highlights the government's responsibility to uphold and protect the workers' rights to health and safety. And that's where we come in. The challenge for us is how to use this leverage to push for structural gains, meaningful changes, and not just temporary and immediate fixes. So that's one thing with regard to OSH. But this, at this point in time, we also need to widen the frame. I've heard in the first panel, they've discussed about the environment. Workers today tell us the dangers they face are no longer limited to chemical exposures or long working hours, although these are still serious concerns of the workers. But now workers are telling us about the harmful effects of extreme heat in poorly, ventilated production areas in electronics companies, production shifts caused by extreme weather events like typhoons. So all of this, emerging hazards affect workers' health and safety. So the connection or the link between OSH, workers' rights, and climate change is getting clearer and stronger at this point. We cannot protect workers if they are in precarious jobs, if they are in environments made more dangerous by climate change. So I think for Electronics Watch, the next 10 years would really require a truly holistic approach. So moving forward, Olga, I believe that collaborating with and capacitating labor unions on all these aspects, whether formal or informal organizations of workers, workers should be or must continue to be at the heart of Electronics Watch next decade.
That is a really important and element that we absolutely need to not forget. We've been discussing that in the previous panel, and now absolutely for the next 10 years. So we'll come back a little bit on this, what it means to develop this holistic approach. But first, let me get Richard in as well to tell us a little bit more as well about the role of the public buyer and how you're engaging as a key actor in this process, and how you see your role as well in the next 10 years in this context that Nadia has also so eloquently pictured to us.
Sure, thanks, Olga. It's been really exciting to see far more tenders and contracts now covering off modern slavery. Our affiliation has allowed us to improve our supply chain transparency and our buying using a simple but highly effective improvement to our tendering process. We've got 8 campuses within Australia and around the world, and procurement and the modern slavery program are reasonably complex for that reason. So what we did was, during tenders or equipment refreshes, we now send the information to Electronics Watch early in the process. The amazing reports that we receive back allow us to be aware of any known issues before buying decisions are made. And it's supported a far more proactive approach to buying electronics. Where it's appropriate, the early information allows us to provide feedback to suppliers at a time when they're most open to listening, which is the pre-sales time. We've had at least one instance of a supply chain failing to act reasonably in relation to modern slavery, and that resulted in a material lost sales opportunity. It also means that we have reasonable supply chains, and we've got confidence that we are ordering from reasonable supply chains. Electronics Watch reports allow us to look back and see the bigger picture, patterns or problems, and also the great remediation work that's underway. This year, Electronics Watch managed to give us visibility across a couple of mines in our supply chain, one of the first examples of visibility that far back in any of our supply chains. Personally, I found that very exciting. As we all know, even getting to tier 2 or 3 can be really difficult. To get to a mine is mind-blowing. Because of Electronics Watch, we have a genuine improvement in transparency and of our electronic supply chains. We're really excited that many universities across Australia and New Zealand are now looking at working with Electronics Watch as part of the Australian Universities Procurement Network. This is a model that works. I was delighted to see the careful and considered approach by Electronics Watch to our suppliers and their businesses as they focus on helping the victims. Our purchasing of electronics is very much improved now. Electronics Watch proved that a trust-based model can work. They also proved that working together, we can make a real difference.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Richard, for giving us this picture of how it actually does work and how you have found it transformative, I guess, as well in the way you act. And yeah, I'll come back to you as well to discuss what this is going to look like in 10 years. But let me first introduce Bjorn and to pick up as well on these 3 key challenges of which Nadia has already pointed at. Occupational health and safety is one of the substantive, and now Richard has actually really demonstrated how credible evidence and evidence that you can trust, that comes from a trusted source, actually makes a difference in the way public buyers act, and of course beyond the critical piece of remediation. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olga, and thank you and greetings to everybody. I just want to start by apologizing for my technical mishaps this morning, and in case my internet connection is still unstable, I hope that we can still move on. But Olga, you might give me a sign if something happens. I again apologize for this. So to the challenges. First of all, let's go back to the basics. Workers are the best monitors in their own workplaces. They're present around the clock. They see what's going on. They see what's wrong. They have ideas for solutions. And they want their workplaces to succeed. They always do. So any sustainable improvements is not possible without a genuine worker voice and worker influence. And the best way for workers to have a voice is through a union. Still, when workers are trying to form a union, then all too often they're met with union busting. That is to say that workers are denied their fundamental enabling right of freedom of association. So this is a challenge that is so fundamental that this year our trustees have approved an amendment to our bylaws that says that promoting and protecting freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining in public buyer supply chain is in fact part of our organizational purpose. And we have also now entered into a collaboration agreement with Industrial for the same reason. So that's challenge number 1, which I think you called a substantive challenge. So next one, which I think you called a procedural one, is the challenge of what does count as credible evidence of rights abuses, or what counts as evidence of compliance with codes in the supply chain. So the question here is, going forward, will it be ESG rating schemes, which typically in fact are based solely on company self-assessments? Will we rely upon AI tools or social audits where workers are sidelined to one extent or another? Or the question is, will we come together to affirm that there is no credible evidence of rights violation? There is no credible evidence of compliance with codes that does not put those who are potentially harmed, that is workers in our case, in the center of the investigatory process. So the reason I want to hold out this as really fundamental challenge is that if we do not agree upon the facts of a case, then collaboration to address issues is near impossible. And a final challenge then is we come to meaningful stakeholder engagement, which I think we all recognize is fundamental to any effective human rights due diligence. So today we have a situation where harm to workers, environment, communities in supply chains is addressed largely through corporate control systems. These are audits and corrective actions that are designed and controlled by corporate actors. This is a structurally flawed system, I would say, because meaningful stakeholder engagement is a way to effectively address harms in global supply chains as equals, we don't have a way to do this as equals now, unless we translate this wonderful idea that meaningful stakeholder engagement is, as articulated in guidance and in laws, into actual practice. And that's the challenge. Will we be able to do that in practice?
Wonderful. Thank you, Bjorn. And picking up on this as well, and what Nadia, you were saying about, developing a truly holistic approach, and therefore what are the connection with these challenges as well to do this. So as Bjorn has put it, this need for workers to be equals in not just, and I think, Deepika also put it in the previous challenge, not just as sources of information, but, as driving the engagement process, as driving the remediation processes as well. So what do you see as the main tools that we have for this and to make it into this, the next decade of electronics watch being something that not only addresses these challenges, but actually establishes the steps to the systemic change we've been talking about in the previous panels as well. Oh, you're mute, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Olga. Actually, these are really, challenging times. Looking ahead on what we can achieve in the next 10 years, it really requires us to hold or grasp firmly, highlight, our achievements, and face the continuing challenges to let them serve as our foundations for welcoming the next decade. So let me just maybe share some highlights first. First, worker-driven, monitoring has become one of our strongest tools. We should really take hold of that. Workers now play a more active role in identifying hazards, raising concerns, and shaping solutions. That is a major achievement, because if we want to embrace, the holistic approach, we really need to look back on these major achievements that we have. But we still face, the biggest barrier, as Bjorn has stated, that one of the toughest challenge is, the seeing this across many countries, not just in Asia, where Philippines is, but across the globe. We're in the shrinking space, for civil society and workers' organizations. So that really is a big barrier before we can, proceed on taking this, holistic approach, facing not just workers' rights challenges, but even, environmental issues brought about by climate change. When workers are afraid to speak up because of, red tagging, harassment, and threats that they receive, when unions cannot operate freely, when even civil society partners are not able to engage openly, it will become really extremely difficult to, involve workers meaningfully in taking the holistic approach. And so I want to look back on why electronics watch model is, so important. Because we want to scale the impact of this, the testimonies or the shared by our partners a while ago. The model is positive. The model that we're implementing has produced big results, but we need to strengthen this model even further. One suggestion is, we need stronger protection and support mechanism to ensure that workers and civil society partners can participate freely in monitoring and remediation without fears. So I think in the next 10 years, to have this holistic approach, we need also to ensure more secure reporting channels. More secure reporting channels and more clear enforceable commitments against any retaliation. And number two, for that holistic approach, we really must deepen long-term long-term relationships with trade unions, workers' organizations, migrant networks, and even women workers collectives across the globe. And we must also look into not just formal unions. If we want actually to take to overcome these barriers, we also need to consider having relationships also with those organizations by workers who are, in the informal setting, and not just be limited with the formal unions. And lastly, when I imagine, Olga, the next 10 years, I think about the power of not just holistic approach, but the power of cumulative gains. We can only achieve these cumulative gains if we hold tightly to what we've already built, and of course, bravely confront these challenges that we all have mentioned. But most importantly, we must trust, again, the word trust, the big word trust, in the determination of the workers themselves. Let's ground Electronics Watch next decade on the workers' courage and the workers' lived experiences. Because when workers and us, the global community stand together, stand along with each other, I am sure that we will not only, celebrate better policies on labor and OSH rights, but we will have strengthened rights in the next decade, in the next 10 years.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Nadia. And really connecting with this, you hear Nadia representing the workers and the challenges on the ground, and you heard her talking how we need, monitoring remediation without fears, and part of this is building longer-term and deeper relationships between all the actors, and this obviously includes you and includes the public buyers, but you find yourself as well with competing demands, and your time and your resources are now also facing even more, I guess, pressures as well. So how do you see yourself in this evolution as well, in this process of strengthening the role of workers, as Nadia has said, continuing to put workers at the center and building this trust that that is essential for addressing the violations and remediating them. How do you see looking farther out and looking forward your role?
One way we've helped scale is working as part of the Australian Universities Procurement Network. It's a network of approximately 41 universities, and it's really exciting that the group is currently trialling Electronics Watch affiliation. Effectively, that's almost the entire higher education sector of Australia and New Zealand, which is a really big deal. When you look at what the sector would spend, it is a lot. My university alone has 70,000 students. You can imagine the scale of everything to deal with that. If I look further out, I do wonder if there could be a future for those of us that buy to have the ability to more directly communicate with workers at some stage of the Electronics Watch process. The availability of video conferencing, ironically electronics, removes any potential travel issues, creates the ability to remove distance from the equation. That distance is often part of what stops buyers having a more direct engagement. For example, getting budget to go see a factory might be impossible for many. We can end the concept of remote factories in remote countries. It's about the workers, and I think that we should work on how workers and buyers communicating might become part of the standard process. I see that as a challenge for Electronics Watch and its affiliates. Extend the carefully thought through Electronics Watch model to further break down the barriers between workers and buyers, because I believe we're working with the same goal. Imagine a world where we confirm that the workers are reasonably treated before we consider a factory, and we can do it personally. Reasonable employment, reasonable electronics, reasonable business practices. It won't be easy, but I don't think that we're asking too much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. And so Bjorn, with this in this setting of Nadia has so well explained and Richard has so positively linked to. So what do you see as looking forward in terms of, you've pointed at the challenges and how we need to overcome them, but just more widely, how does the model scale up and becomes a truly holistic model that considers all the actors?
Right. I will definitely endorse several of the comments that Nadia and Richard have just made. But to take it from the top down, so first of all is the challenge of freedom of association, of workers actually monitoring their own workplaces. This is, of course, a challenge for decades, almost centuries, right? So what is realistic that we can see in the next 10 years? A couple of things, I think. I do think that we can see the network of civil society monitoring partners becoming more adept at both understanding and reporting on violations of freedom of association, on union busting, in such a way that, as Nadia said, they are secure, and also so that buyers can hold suppliers accountable. So I think we'll learn a lot more about the issues and the violations before we sort of turn a corner and say, and see that there is a lot of workplaces where workers actually do have a genuine voice. I also think from a public buyer perspective, it might be possible to take the next steps in supply chain mapping here, where we are actually mapping where are there trade union agreements already, where are the collective bargaining agreements already, where is there some form of genuine worker voice, as Nadia said, is independent perhaps of a union, so that public buyers then understand how and when they can use incentives and reward structures to promote the genuine worker voice in their supply chain. This might be a way we can move forward in the next 10 years. These are modest steps, but I think that we need to, but I think they are entirely feasible, and I think they'll be impactful. Then, if I go on to the question about credible evidence, I do think that because of the rise of AI, I think we're going to have constant questions about sources of evidence. Can we trust this? Can we not trust this? But at the same time, I do also think there's a realistic that we are going to see a significant advance in public buyer capacity to evaluate quality and credibility of evidence that they receive from their suppliers, and ability among public buyers to actually challenge poor evidence and push supply chains to accept evidence that's based upon credible worker testimony. I do think that's realistic, that we elevate that level of capacity. That will have an impact. And what we'll see then also, I think, is that a group of leading companies that are transparent, more, and will listen more and more to what workers are saying. And that takes us to the last one about meaningful stakeholder engagement. And here, I completely endorse what Richard is saying. That I think in 10 years from now, we will be able to celebrate even closer relationships between the public buyers in our network and the workers in the work organization, worker representatives in our network. We probably don't even know how that will happen right now, but I do think that will happen. And in addition to that, I would say that we will see leading companies have ongoing collaborations with trade unions and grassroots organizations that represent workers, and that these companies will learn more and more about the risks in their supply chains, about the issues that workers face through this kind of engagement, rather than through ESG rating schemes or AI or even social audits. And when that happens, what is really important is that we will be able to slowly turn a page and focus more on the prevention of rights violations rather than separately reparations.
Great, thank you, Bjorn. And
so,
I think,
if I were to look in a crystal ball, those are things,
yes.
I think, yeah.
I'll ask you for a crystal ball view, just just wanted to point to this, the idea, I think, as well. So important of like focusing on prevention would mean in a way that we don't need to, we're not finding as many instances of actual violations. But I think one challenge that is not only structural, but we can call it existential for the next 10 years, given that in the past 10 years, we've significantly progressed in worker-driven monitoring, and Nadia has pointed at this as well as one of our key tools. But we still have the challenge on how to place workers at the center of remediation processes. So we have, and Richard has pointed as well, of, to what extent the capacity of public buyers to actually have a more direct connection with workers to actually be able to push for remedy, not just to push for information and that gives leverage to start a negotiation, but actually push for remedy is a challenge of the next 10 years, and where we should be celebrating, in my crystal ball first, and then we'll come to yours, is to celebrate that we've gone from enabling conditions of change to actually transformative change. And therefore, that's why I would like this final word on crystal ball vision, and through the theme that brings us together here, which is collaboration. And another theme that I think has been really important that came out in the previous panel, which is trust. Trust in the process, trust in the results, trust in the evidence, trust in the information, trust on that can only happen when we have a level playing field and we have equality of power in the engagement. And closing with what Pichamon said as well, to do with the role of solidarity in all of these sectors. What do you see as your crystal ball vision in this journey of collaboration and trust that we have in the next 10 years? So Bjorn, I can see that you're teaming to go, so you go first.
Yeah, and again, apologize. I hear that my sound is not always too clear, so I apologize again for that. But look, I think that building trust and building genuine collaborative relationships is simply a lot of hard work, and it's not work that we are perhaps accustomed to doing. Collaborating effectively with one's own peers, that is hard enough. But collaborating, with a whole range of different stakeholders without making assumptions about each other, about where we're coming from, that is so much more difficult. And I think that we need to be patient doing that. But as long as we do that seriously and patiently, I do think that trust will emerge, and I do think that we will see, we will be able to turn the corner from fighting fires around, in case after case after case, alerts, emergencies, every time we look at a place, to actually saying, well, how do we actually build the relationships? And how do we build the trust in each other that allows us to actually to prevent some of the risks that we're seeing now of becoming full-blown emergencies for workers? So I think that we can begin to do that. We will, I think that the companies are an integral participant here, and there will be some companies that are absolutely willing to take this journey with us.
Wonderful. Richard, would you like to share with us your crystal ball moment? And you're mute.
I think I would agree with Bjorn. The trust is cumulative. I think trust is built and developed, and I think Electronics Watch has done an amazing foundation. And although each relationship that started might be a unique relationship, it does also reflect back on Electronics Watch's reputation. And for me, I think the future is about continuing building that amazing reputation, because that reputation opens doors and that reputation starts conversations. And although it's something Electronics Watch has already been doing, I would highly suggest we continue doing that in earnest, because it's all about trust.
Wonderful. And Nadia, please, can you tell us your vision? And we close the panel with you and your voice, which is obviously the voice on the ground, which is the voice that brings us what really where the change really has to be.
Thank you, Olga. And I know that I've mentioned that in order for us to see a brighter decade ahead, we really should place our full trust to the workers, courage, the workers, experiences. But let me end with, I think, 4 wishes for 2025. Yeah, for 2025 and beyond, actually. One is, as an OSH activist, I really would like OSH to be respected as a fundamental right and not just a compliance checkbox. Second, because we believe in, we're practicing worker-driven monitoring, worker-led remediation, workers' voices, especially those vulnerable ones, the women, the migrants, the LGBTQ, the temporary and contractual workers, they should be heard and they should shape the labor rights decisions in workplaces. Number 3, the holistic approach that I mentioned a while ago, climate resilience. It should become a part of our monitoring. It should become part of workers' planning in the workplace level and not just an afterthought. And lastly, representing the workers, of course, trade unions should not be only consulted, but I know and I trust Electronics Watch that we could empower the workers and let them lead, the protection and upholding of their rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Well, here are our 4 challenges for the future, and we'll be held to account in 2035, and these. So thank you very much to our panelists, and I now close this panel, which has been a fantastic discussion onto what what we've achieved, but what we need to achieve, and what are the main elements that we need to take into account for the next 10 years. How we rise to all these challenges that we've been highlighting through the event, and how we become stronger through collaboration and through this trusting that we all occupy the same space and we all should be engaging as peers and as equals. So I would like now to pass on the floor to Bjorn to close our event. And just a reminder to everyone, our Padlet is still open, and it'll be open for another half an hour. Bjorn, we've had a very successful participation in the Padlet, and people are really helping us with the shaping the global vision and the global manifesto that Jim Crenshaw very aptly will help us as well put together. So without further ado, Bjorn, the floor is yours to close this wonderful celebration that we've been having.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga. So for this closing, I think it's best if everybody turns on their gallery view. So we have heard lots of significant challenges on the road ahead, and we've even created a collective vision for moving ahead. The key to this, realizing this vision, is effective collaboration. And this is collaboration with all stakeholders. So in order to visualize what this collaboration looks like, I am going to call out everyone who in one way or another is coming together to meet these challenges. And as I'm going to name you group by group, and as I name you, I would like you to turn on your cameras. So right now you don't need to have your cameras on, but when I name you, then turn on your cameras. Otherwise it won't have much effect. Okay, so first of all, I would like to call out staff of Electronics Watch and also previous staff and country representatives. So please come forward as you would do in a physical event to turn on your cameras. Thank you so much. This is a team here that makes it all happen. This is a team that's incredibly capable, motivated, dedicated, and it's really a pleasure to work with all of you. So thank you. Next group, trustees, and also for any former trustees who are on, who are part here. Trustees, our trustees have always taken a great deal of ownership in the organization. They care a lot about the organization and they provide essential guidance. So thank you so much to trustees for the work that you do. Next, we have a group, all affiliates on the call who are not yet on camera. Please, affiliates, turn on your cameras. Affiliates, we have heard, are more and more active. It is fantastic because that's how we realize our mission. Every day they're learning about how to collaborate to use their leverage. Trustees, you are really the engine of this work. So thank you for everything that you do. Next group, monitoring partners. Now it's beginning to get a little bit crowded here. Monitoring partners, please turn on your cameras, and trustees, keep yours on too. Everybody keeps yours on. As we have heard, monitoring partners can face incredibly tough conditions and sometimes even dangerous conditions, but they always, I've seen, keep looking forward. They're always persistent. So thank you to monitoring partners for being such a vital part of this network. Next, I would like to call out trade unions. And trade unions, please turn on your camera, representatives of. Trade unions are not in charge of monitoring for Electronics Watch, but they're a very, very important strategic partner without whom we could not do this work. The next, project partners. I think you know who you are. Project partners and also funders. Please come on screen, turn on your cameras. Of course, we cannot do this work without you, without funders, with project partners. This collaboration is essential. And finally, also, actually not finally, but next, companies and industry associations. Please also turn on your cameras. Electronics Watch, as you know, is independent from the industry, but we highly value the progress that we can do through open and honest dialogue and collaboration with companies. So please turn on your cameras too. And the next group is actually everyone. Everyone who hasn't turned on the cameras yet, because ultimately this work is about how your tax money is spent, right? It is about your values. And ultimately you can demand that your tax money should be spent to uphold worker rights and defend our environment and our climate. So everybody is actually part of this collaboration, so turn on your cameras. And so now I want to say, keep your cameras on for a moment. We're going to take a screenshot here. If you don't want your image to appear in the screenshot that we post on social media or website, then turn off your cameras right now. But right now we're going to take a screenshot. I'll give a moment to do that. Count to 5.
Sorry, Björn.
Okay.
And, Heidi Hautala as well. Thank you very much. And I think it would be great if you can put your cameras on as well.
Please, Heidi and Pichamon, I'm sure you are part of one of these groups that I mentioned. Please do turn on the cameras. Yes. And so with that, I just want to end with a huge thank you to all the staff who put this event together, our unsung heroes as always in communications, Martina Hooper, Harriet Edwards. Thank you to Olga, who did such a tremendous job moderating this whole event. For Pichamon and Heidi, who I have heard made really inspiring comments and event speeches that unfortunately I will have to catch up with later. But Heidi and Pichamon, thank you so much for your keynotes. And thank you at last to everybody for participating, and happy anniversary.